discovery. At a certain stage, we faced a challenge. The land was not being released because we had someone else leading the project. So I decided that I want to join the project director and an elderly person in the community who would serve as our interpreter to visit the chief and discuss the land issue. Before entering the palace, I asked the elder if there were any cultural practices I needed to respect. He assured me and said, "Oh, it's fine." But when we sat down and the chief walked in, I stretched my arms to shake him and greet him. He ignored it and shook only the men's hands. I felt deeply uncomfortable. I was like, maybe it was a mistake, an oversight. And later, when the chief sat down, the men stood up again, and instinctively, I also stood up to also shake the chief again. And this time, I was told to sit down. Throughout the meeting, I couldn't speak directly to the chief. Everything I wanted to communicate had to pass through the two people sitting beside me, the interpreter or the project director, even if I was one of the executive leads of the organization. After the meeting, I asked them why, and the elder said, "In this community, women do not shake the chief's hands, and women do not really own lands." This was a huge cultural shock for me. I realized that challenges around land are not just about policies, laws, or even access to resources. They're deeply and can be rooted in culture, traditions, and gender roles. In the end, we did secure the land, but that experience left me with this valuable lesson that land issues are very complex. This is exactly why we are here today, because across the world, young people, youth communities are having so many of such stories, and together, these stories shape land and climate justice. Over the next few days, you will hear many and many more of these stories and solutions across regions from Africa to Latin America and Asia, showing how youth are shaping climate and land justice today, not just tomorrow. This is also a powerful opportunity for young people to articulate their priorities they want championed as we move towards COP30 in Brazil and even beyond that. As we open this plenary under the theme Roots and Futures, Youth, Land and Climate in a Digital World, this session would highlight the vital role of land in shaping youth identities, opportunities, and futures, especially at a time when climate change is placing unprecedented pressures on communities across the globe. It's a true privilege to welcome such a diverse community. I see the introductions pouring in the chat. Indigenous leaders, practitioners, surveyors, youth networks, and allies, all gathered here today to share knowledge, exchange experiences, and inspire collective actions. And just to say, this conference is brought to you by the Land Portal in partnership with Youth Initiative for Land in Africa, Global Alliance of Territorial Communities, Espaço Feminista, The Invisible Thread, Asian NGO Coalition for Agrarian Reform and Rural Development, Connexion Ella, and Witness Radio. For the rest of the conferences, let me give you a little glimpse of what lies ahead. Over the coming days, in the next 3 days till 11th, we'll explore 8 thematic sessions that put youth at the very center. And you hear a lot of stories from me and the participants. They're putting youth at the very center of land and climate action. Together, we'll hear about youth-led solutions for land restoration, Indigenous and Afro-descendant youth using digital media to preserve culture, young women perspectives on land rights, and how access to land can drive rural empowerment and innovation. We would also address the risk faced by young land defenders, highlighting digital tools for resilience, and discuss how youth are leading the charge for land, nature, and climate justice. Therefore, to my fellow participants, this is a call for us all to engage fully, share openly, and collaborate meaningfully.
Diz, querida.
Let's start by asking ourselves this question.
Bom
And
dia.
please do well to share with us. What has your experience been with land? Please do well to put this comment in the chat. What has your experience been with land? We want to see the comment dropping in. Now, to set the ball rolling, it's a great privilege. Allow me to invite a very important person I'll miss today. He serves as the acting team leader at the Land Portal. He's a land information specialist and the programs leader with over 25 years experience in advancing open data, transparent governance, and inclusive knowledge ecosystems. He goes by the name Charles Tombeya and loves to be called Tommy. Tommy, over to you. Audience, your opening scene panel member.
Thank you very much, Betty, for that passionate introduction and that passionate opening. Good morning to all the people joining us online. It is an absolute pleasure and an honor to be here and to be delivering this opening address. And I hope that I can set the right tone for the many smart and committed people that are here today. And I have to say, it's truly inspiring to see so many of you here, young researchers, activists, as well as our many partners that you have already mentioned, Betty. We are here today to explore this nexus between the youth and land. And I think we want to prioritize youth perspectives on land and place them at the center of a global conversation and find a pathway to mainstream these issues that we will discuss over the next 3 days and put those issues in international fora, including COP30 in Brazil. So why this conference? Well, I think it's clear to say that land matters. Land matters to young people, and we should all be happy that it does. Land is an economic commodity, but not only an economic commodity. It is what the Nobel laureate North calls the formal institutions of property. But it is also not only about livelihoods. It is not only about the means of production. Land is also a social institution, not only a formal institution. It is also about the rules, the customs, the norms and practices around land and belonging. Therefore, land is about identity. Land is about dignity, and land is about the future of the youth. But for too many youth, land is not accessible, or access to land and housing is at best uncertain. And there's a huge gap between the aspirations of the youth and the reality in relation to land that they face today. And this matters not only to the youth, but it should matter to all of us, for it affects our ability as a society to build a more just and sustainable world. And we need to leave a world that is better for young people, because they will inherit a world that is fractured, a world that is riven by inequality and a failing response to the climate crisis. Young people are excluded from decision-making, and those holding power today are shaping the future of this planet, are shaping the future of the youth, but often also refuse to listen to the youth. What will the world look like if we continue to ignore the youth and we continue to marginalize their voices? I, for one, say that the world cannot continue on this path. We cannot continue to ignore the youth, to marginalize their voices in the global land debate. Young people need to be at the center of any and all discussions on land and climate, and not because it's fashionable or it's cool to do so, but because without youthful voices, without youthful ideas, without youthful leadership and innovation, our efforts to avert disaster will likely not succeed. And this is one of the reasons why the Land Portal is facilitating this event. We have always been about breaking barriers to knowledge and seek to be a space where land information can flow from all perspectives and all levels. And as a globally certified digital public good, we want to continue to work to make access to knowledge to be seen as part of a public infrastructure that has public utility. It is a right and it is an enabling right. In 2023, we wrote that access to data is not enough. It's about how we use it, how we analyze it, and how we can even contest the power structures that data so often enable or maybe even entrench. And I hope that this conference will be a catalyst to shape youthful narratives, to share experiences in a way that can impact global agendas. The conference is therefore a declaration that we want to catalyze a community, work towards a collective statement of intent, call for recognition, and a roadmap to carry youth voices to the global stage, such as at COP30 and beyond. The youth are already shaping how knowledge is created, shared, and contested. You are the first generation, I think, to be using digital tools and technologies almost from birth, from the earliest years of school, open data, even AI. Your language and communication is much more visual. And you continue to work to amplify voices that have often been silenced. There are true global leaders from the youth. You are showing us new ways to engage with information, not only as static reports that are sitting on shelves, but as living knowledge that can drive accountability, that can fuel storytelling, and that can build movements. And I think that is why this conference matters. It is an opportunity for the youth to speak, to listen, to amplify, and to learn. And together we will try and explore these tough questions. Questions such as, what does land mean for youth identity in a world where mobility, displacement, violence, and insecurity are growing? What barriers are keeping the youth from accessing and securing land? And what would it take to dismantle those barriers? What intersectional aspects, whether gender, class, indigeneity, or others, must be considered if we are to understand the full picture? And how can your ideas gain real visibility, not only within your communities, but on global stages like COP30? And perhaps most urgently, how can the youth not only contribute, but play a leading role in successfully addressing climate change? And how can we support them in that role? In conclusion, to be clear, this is not about handing the youth a seat at the table. It is about reimagining new ways of doing, about building a new table, if you will, a new way where power is shared, where all voices matter for a more just world, and where decisions are made with a generational perspective, not just the next election cycle. The nexus between land, information, climate, and inequality is not academic. It is determining and impacting lives as we speak, and it is shaping the future. I therefore invite you to engage fully, to listen deeply, to bring your energy and innovation to the proverbial table. And together we can ensure that youth are not just participants in the global land and climate agenda, but leaders and change makers that can shape the present and alter the future. I thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Tommy. That was really brilliant. Indeed, young people, we have to build our own table. And yes, land matters. It matters for dignity, it matters for belonging, it matters for livelihood, and it matters for the future. Our next session takes us into a deep dive on the underexplored nexus of youth tenor, insecurities, questions and reflections about identity, challenges posed by climate stress, mitigation, and even adaptation measures. I'm joined today by three speakers from diverse geographies who would share insights, highlight their personal practices and experiences when it comes to youth inclusion. And we will hear a lot of examples from them as well. To my audiences, please do well to put your questions in the chat box. We would read them out to the speakers as the conversation unfolds. Now, allow me to introduce my speakers. With me today, we have Jaylin Diogade. She's a Philippines. She's someone from the Philippines. She's a project staff member at the Xavier Science Foundation and a proud member of the Oma Umnon tribe in Bukidnon, bringing her expertise in agricultural businesses and her commitment to environmental stewardship and indigenous empowerment. The second speaker with us today is Amanda Caroline Martins. She's a Brazilian. Amanda is a Quilomboan leader from the Coses Suandas Criollas, working to advance social and environmental justice, promoting traditional identities, and inspiring sustainable practices within her community. And she does that while pursuing law to defend the Quilombo La rights. The third speaker we have today with us is Becky Zala Mgoni. She's a Zimbabwean. Becky Zala is a research intern at the Transparency International with a background in journalism and media. And she's dedicated to amplifying youth voices, advancing land rights, and tackling issues of transparency and social justice. Now, to our speakers, please, audience, help me invite them. We would like to take some questions to them. And the first question we have for them would go to Amanda. Amanda, we would like to hear from you. What role does land play today for young people in building an identity? And how relevant is this identity for young people in your community?
Bom dia. É, falar sobre a terra é falar sobre quem a gente é, né? A terra para nós não é só um lugar de plantar e de colher, né? É, é onde estão enterradas nossas raízes, onde vivemos, nossos saberes, é onde nascem os nossos sonhos, né? A juventude quilombola, ela constrói sua identidade a partir da relação direta com o território, né? A terra nos ensina desde cedo valores como coletividade, como respeito, cuidado e resistência, né? Eu cresci aprendendo que a terra tem tempo, tem memória, tem voz, e que sem ela a gente perde nossa história, né? Por isso, a terra é essencial na formação da identidade dos jovens na minha comunidade. E não é só a memória, né? A terra também é o lugar onde a gente se projeta para o futuro. Muitos jovens estão voltando a valorizar a agricultura tradicional, né? A agroecologia, os mutirões e a cultura ancestral. E em tempo em que tantas coisas tentam nos afastar de quem somos, é a terra que nos reconecta, né? Ela é resistência e também é caminho de cura. Então, a nossa relação com o território é uma relação histórica e afetiva. É ali que estão enterrados os nossos ancestrais, onde o conhecimento tradicional é transmitido em geração.
Wow, thank you so much for that insightful response. Land has time, it has memory, it has voice, and it's a pathway as well for a lot of communities. And now I'd like to throw the ball to Jaylene here. I'd like to hear from you, from your experience. What are the key challenges for young people in accessing land and securing tenure? Jaylene, if you're talking, you're muted, please. Great.
Good day, everyone. Yes, thank you. I'm pleased to be here. And one of my, based on my experience, one of the biggest challenges I encountered
Jaylene, you can
in
turn
my
off your
work
video so
and
that we
in
can
my
hear you clearly.
community's youth voices. So that is one of young people are left out of decision-making process. Maybe because there is a perceived knowledge gap between us and elders regarding land governance and land rights. In many ways, young people are excluded. And second is concerns of young people can be disregarded, and we face limited access to important information that could really help our communities. The silence that is imposed on us can erode traditional knowledge, and it affects our confidence in speaking up and fighting our rights to land. And with nowadays climate change happening so rapidly, the risk of losing our ancestral wisdom becomes even greater. Despite these barriers, it's amazing to still see more indigenous youth stepping up as land defenders. But we know that being a land defenders is not easy. It comes with real sacrifices. Young people face threats to their physical safety, and which make others afraid to get involved in community activities, especially defending their rights as indigenous people to secure their land tenure. And also lack of financial to support and to sustain the advocacy and secure the land tenure of the young people. And sometimes elders and youth disagree about how land should be used or managed. And yet, despite all these struggles, their indigenous youth continue to stand firm, fight, and raise their voices, even if they are not always heard and recognized, because defending our lands means defending itself, not just for us, but for all the generations to come. That's all. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Jaylene. Yes, despite all these challenges, young people are still standing up and they are still doing unimaginable things in their communities. Now, I just want to pass it down to Becca Zella, talking about governance with someone like you who have experience in policies. I'd like to hear from you. In terms of land governance, we always see risk of corruption. From your perspective, how does corruption affect young people's access to land, and what role can transparency play in addressing this particular issue?
Thank you so much for having me here. So maybe my response to the question would be that corruption creates opportunities for powerful elites to abuse land allocation processes, leading to disadvantaging of vulnerable groups. Vulnerable groups in this case are young people and women. Like I said, I'm biased to issues.
Becca Zella, you're muted, so please unmute.
Oh, apologies on that. I was trying to switch on my camera. It also reinforces inequalities where young people are further marginalized and disadvantaged. Maybe in terms of even there are some issues where young people or when it comes to access to land, you have to pay bribery, you have to pay money. And we've noticed that young people do not have the financial backbone. So in a way, we are discriminated when it comes to participating in land issues. But maybe my answer when it comes to transparency, what they can do, I'm thinking transparency should provide accessible public information when it comes to land issues. Because one of the reasons why young people are not participating in land rights, land policies, it's because we do not understand some of the issues. And maybe transparency should also lobby for the use of technology to promote transparency in land access. Let's use e-governance to address human manipulation in land governance. I spoke about corruption where the powerful elites tend to benefit, disadvantaging the young people. And let's also maybe lobby for young people to be given high preferences in terms of land allocation, where they already struggle to access land. So if there is high preference for young people in terms of accessing land, that would probably work. And we could also have a proper vetting system, especially in land ownership. We have other people who are owning multiple properties, and we have young people who cannot afford land, especially in low income owners. And another thing, there's need to push for gender equality. The speaker who opened, she spoke about patriarchy. We are living in a patriarchal society where women and young people are not recognized. It's my father, the grandparents who have the high priority when it comes to ownership of land. So if we push for gender equality and gender equity, having young people in decision-making processes when it comes to land issues would actually help. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much, Bekezela, for that. Indeed, young people are going through a lot and talking about patriarchy and talking about we not understanding what it is. Information flow. I believe that's the reason why such conferences are very, very important. Still talking about challenges, allow me to bring in Diana from the Land Portal as well. Diana, I want to hear from you, from your experiences. What are some of the key challenges that young people or youth face when it comes to accessing land from your work with the Land Portal?
Thank you very much, Betty, for having us and moderating this session excellently. When I look at challenges, and this is through the experience of work we've been doing, I try to divide the youth in like two groups. We have the rural youth, and we also have the people who are coming up in urban setups. And in the rural, in most African setups, we find youth have access to land through inheritance, and sometimes there's also discrimination of both the young male and the young female. Not going into details to that, but sometimes the challenges to access to land go just beyond accessing it, but what are you using it to make yourself, to have a better life for yourself? So we find that young people, for example, you have a half an acre of land, for example, you want to do agriculture, feed your family, but you are not having access to the right markets, access to the right opportunities to produce whatever you are producing so that you can maybe sell surplus and get income for your family. So if this young person, for example, has access but doesn't have access to the right system to utilize this land into better opportunities, and this person then again moves to the urban areas in search of better opportunities. We are seeing across Africa, and I'm expecting also in other regions, that most of our cities, majority of the population is crowded in the informal settlement and in the peri-urban, because that is where young people can afford housing, can afford a small shed for your small car wash, can afford a small shed for your flower garden so that you can sell the seedlings to whomever is buying. I think this is a common characteristics in all of our cities. So most of the young people are now in the informal settlements where the government doesn't have proper system to support this creativity that these young people are coming up with. So sometimes you find they're always in conflict with the local authority, the city council, yet they have access, but not in a more structured or a legal way. I don't want to use legal. They don't have an agreement with the governing system to access this land. Do these people have ideas to change or to utilize this land properly? Yes. And then the access turns from being just not access to livelihoods, but also it goes now to the issue of land degradation because of improper use. So sometimes we have access, but we don't have the proper systems to use this land to be of good for us. Gonna pause there. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much, Diana. From your conversation, I'm hearing a lot on access, a lot on recognition, which is very, very important. And the reason why I want to pass the ball now to Jaylene. Jaylene, I want to hear from you what you think about these two key words, visibility, recognition. How can youth abilities gain more visibility and recognition, both within their communities, internationally, and globally? And what do you think the practices of youth inclusion can be? How have you seen this reflected in your work as well? So, Jaylene, over to you.
Okay, so in my based on my experience, especially in my work as project staff, we really need to uh, empower youth, especially their leadership, and also because the generation now can bring creativity to tackle modern challenges, and the sense of responsibility to protect traditions and rights of indigenous people, especially young people. And also we have to build bridges through cultural exchange, dialogue with elders, government, and solidarity among indigenous youth across different regions, so that knowledge flows and identities are preserved, and also unity becomes our strength. Thank you.
Wow. Unity becomes our strength. Very important. She's talking about access to information. That's why you have to visit the land portal to see the several information they have on information pertaining to land tenure, climate justice for youth, etc. And now allow me to also ask the same question to Amanda. Amanda, I would like to hear from you. Can you share some of the practices of youth inclusion that you have done with respect to the work you do in the communities? Amanda.
Nós, jovens quilombola, temos criatividade, né? Temos força, sabedoria e solução. Mas muitas vezes o que a gente faz não é reconhecido dentro de políticas públicas, nem no olhar da sociedade. E como agente de sustentabilidade, vejo isso todos os dias. Temos jovens na agroecologia, temos jovens na comunicação popular, na educação ambiental, na cultura, e mesmo assim somos pouco ouvidos. E em Conceição das Crioulas, a gente tem buscado mudar isso. Criamos espaço de formação com os mais velhos, oficinas para jovens, projetos de recatingamento com saber ancestrais, e temos usado a comunicação digital como ferramenta de fala e de valorização. Mas a visibilidade que a gente precisa vai além das redes sociais. É preciso políticas públicas que apoiem, financiem e que protejam a juventude quilombola. E, internacionalmente, o reconhecimento passa por entender que o que a gente faz em pequenas comunidades, como cuidar de uma nascente ou proteger uma semente crioula, é uma ação global. A juventude não quer apenas ser incluída, queremos ser ouvidas, respeitadas e chamadas para construir soluções juntos, né? Nada de nós sem nós, não é isso?
Wow, thank you. Know about us and with us. Thank you so much for that very interesting feedback from your end. And indeed, it's very important that young people are included when it comes to global policies. Now, let me throw this back to Diana and hear from you what you think about some of the practices for youth inclusion, respect to even what the land portal does. How have you enabled young people to be included when it comes to global policies on climate, on resilience? Would you want to share some of those practices with us,
I think
Diana?
I think one of the things that comes to me in mind is actual collaboration, collaborating with civil society organization, youth-led organizations, indigenous organization, and also recognizing the data that is coming from ground up. That way we can have more informed decisions. We can inform our policies with data that is actually collected from people who are living these experiences, because with this kind of partnership, we are going to inform this policy with a lot of awareness from the people and not coming from on top and then deciding what we think these people should have. And I think one thing that is very critical for us to also remember is when, for example, when we talk about indigenous people, they have been in the forefront of the climate action before even it was becoming a cool thing. So including these voices from the young people, from the organizations that they have, and letting them educate us, I think that is one of the things that is going to soldier us forward in this course. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much. And I believe that's what the Land Portal is doing across all their work, ensuring that young people, this like disadvantaged communities are participating wholly and fully when it comes to decision making and contributing to exactly what they want to see in communities nationally, internationally, and even beyond. Now, talking about the international and the intersectional aspect, we spoke about from the challenges to what having land really means, what land means to community. Now, I want us to look at the complexity of it, and I'm going to bring in Becca Zella here. You have a lot of experience when it comes to gender issues on land, class, or even land when it comes to indigenous ownership. I want to hear from you. How do you think these intersections, gender, class, and indigenous background play when it comes to shaping youth experiences of land? Becca Zella.
Okay, my response will always go back to the issues of patriarchy. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you
So,
are.
in our communities, women access to land is limited and they are sidelined due to societal issues. Talk about patriarchy. Women are mainly placed under men as long as the man has access to resources. We see it as if Bege as the wife stands to benefit, but that's not the case. The world and the Afrocentric views are not found in important when it comes to having women in leadership positions. And then when it comes to class, those with class can influence land policies. And in this case, mainly it's the adults, not young people. Like I said, we already have challenges when it comes to financial resources. And when you don't have money, it's not easy for you to even make the right noises. And even in terms of leadership, we have very few young people who are in leadership positions. So in a way, it's not easy for us to at least have influence in terms of policy formulations. And the young people face barriers in accessing land as compared to men due to patriarchy. And maybe we need to also make sure that we realize that we need to push for gender equality and equity to ensure that young people have a space. And when it comes to background, those in rural communities tend to suffer as compared to those in urban areas. So there is need to make sure that we have policies that do not leave young people behind to ensure that they have access to land. So in my country, what happens is if my mom and my dad are married, it's clear that my brother stands to benefit. He will get land. But when it comes to me as a lady, chances of me getting access to the land are low. And maybe sometimes for me as a woman to access land, we spoke about the chiefs. That means I have to use my body because we don't have financial resources. So that way I have to sleep with maybe the chiefs to access land. So issues of gender, class, not having money, we end up using our bodies to access land, which is a challenge. Corruption always win, and those in marginalized and disadvantaged groups stand to suffer a lot. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Bekazela. This is a very interesting and important discussion that we don't have to allow it to just rest here, but we have to take this conversation forward because it's really happening in all our communities in access exclusion. It's very, very important, and seeing how even women are now more disadvantaged when it comes to access to such opportunities and land. Talking about land, we know that it has a direct correlation with climate change. I'd like to hear from the participants. And please, before I bring in the next question, all the participants, please, in the chat box, do also put in your question, and we would engage the speakers with those questions as well. So now I would like to hear from the speakers. I'll start with Jaylene. Jaylene, in what ways do you think young people can contribute meaningfully to addressing climate change through their relationship with land?
Okay, so our my experience, young indigenous people are becoming leaders in climate activism by championing land rights. Here in Philippines, especially in Bukidnon, we are combating environmental degradation and preserving traditional lifestyles. And also, we are right now in a process of securing our land tenure. And also, preserving traditional knowledge is very helpful because it will young people will embrace the ancestral knowledge systems, and youth can defend their land and territories, especially actively leading on climate change with nature-based solutions. So thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much for that, nature-based solutions. And I want to take it to Amanda. What do you think about this? How can young people contribute meaningfully to addressing climate change through their relationship with land? Amanda, if you're speaking.
Então, as mudanças climáticas não são uma coisa distante de nós, né? No meu território, a gente já sente na pele, né? A seca é mais longa, a chuva demora a chegar, menos águas nos barreiros, mudanças nas plantações. Mas mesmo diante de tantas dificuldades, seguimos existindo, né? Como jovem e agente de sustentabilidade, eu vejo que nosso modo de viver já é uma resposta concreta à crise climática. A juventude da minha comunidade vem cuidando da terra com responsabilidade, né? A gente vem preservando as matas nativas, replantando, compartilha sementes tradicionais, promove mutirões e aprende com os mais velhos como respeitar os ciclos da natureza. Isso é enfrentamento climático na prática. E é por isso que digo, os jovens quilombolas precisam ser reconhecidos como protagonistas na luta climática, não como vítimas apenas. Estamos preparados para construir, desde que nos deixe ocupar espaço de decisão. Né? A justiça climática precisa ter rosto preto, jovem e quilombola, porque se a terra é vida, somos nós quem temos cuidado dela por séculos, não é verdade? E agora queremos cuidar com mais força, com mais voz e participação. Precisamos estar nos espaços de decisões, com voz e com poder.
Wow, thank you so much for that. We need to be included. Young people need to be included. Now, let me give it to Diana in just 2 minutes, briefly, on the same question.
Thank you, Betty. I want to talk more about the urban youth, and that is where most population is. So when you tell them, what do you think you can do with what you have to combat climate? Most will say, I don't have land, plant trees, I don't have, such things. Well, I'm thinking the weapon that we have right now is to gather as much knowledge as possible and use this to be critical in the way we bring up solutions, be innovative in the opportunities that we create for ourselves, whether it's in the urban, peri-urban, or even rural. So let's say I want to start a small car wash business. How innovative can I be so that I don't, produce worse or harm the earth worse? So I think learn as much as possible, and let's start try to be very critical. And the more the knowledge we gain, when the opportunity is presented for us, for example, climate financing, we know we have very groundbreaking ideas that we can use, and you can use these funds to towards the climate goal. Yeah, that's all I'll say.
Thank you very much for that. And just to also take some of the questions from the chat, I'd like to pass this to Bekatzela. Would like to hear from you a question from Garcia Polanco. She asks us that what would be the best strategy to involve young people in land titling process? Do we have to be enrolled in governance or government agencies? And is it easy to find out how the process of accessing land works? With your background, I believe this question would be suited for you.
I did not get the question. Can you please repeat the question
Okay.
and slowly this time, please?
Yeah. What would be the best strategy to involve young people in land titling process? Do we have to be enrolled in government agencies? And is it easy to find out how the process of assessing land works?
Maybe responding with my country in mind, it's not easy for young people to access the information. That's why in the beginning, I said, how about we use e-governance? We digitalize the information for young people to access the information. For example, young people are too much into technology. So if we have technology, young people are able to get this information. And I'm thinking, let's have young people in leadership spaces, in decision-making processes on issues to do with land. That way, they understand how the process goes. But in this case, if we're not involved, it's not easy for them to understand how the process goes. So if they participate, and maybe let's also have multi-stakeholder conversations where young people also take leadership in those conversations. One of the initiatives, like what you're doing, it actually helps because it helps us as young people to change our attitude around participating. Let's have young people, even in government positions where decisions are made, because I know issues that affect young people. And I'm in a better position to articulate them. But you can't expect someone who's 50 years old to go and advocate for issues that affect me. So let's have young people taking the lead role when it comes to issues to do with land policies, land rights. Let's teach them, let's educate them. And another thing, we need to educate young people as they are vulnerable to multiple forms of corruption. They don't need to normalize corruption. They need to monitor and track corruption when it comes to land issues and report. Thank you. I'm not sure if I answered his question.
Yeah, you did. So maybe we'll just circle back on if someone have to be part of the government or to join the government agencies to access land. Is that what is happening in your community? Do you have to join the government agencies to access land?
Not really, but the majority of people who are powerful are part of the government.
Okay.
Especially young people. Young people in my country are not as powerful. So even if we have young people who have access to land, it means in a way they have connection to the elites, the powerful elites. Otherwise, if you don't have connection, you are a nobody. You will go and apply for land and you stay in the list, while others go today, apply, and get land. And
Yeah.
even in terms of power, we don't have financial resources. So
Mm.
even if I go and apply, someone comes and apply and they give money, they get access to the land fast, unlike those with no money. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bekezela, for that. I hope we've responded to your question. Please, you can keep the questions flowing in. If we cannot answer everything, we can respond to you later after the conference or in the other sessions of the conference. And now I would like to pass this question to Diana. This question comes from Felicia Ebuka, and it says that we talk more of terrestrial land. How does it affect youth in the agri sector since agriculture connects all, the rich, poor, old, and young? Diana, over to you.
Sorry, I didn't get the first word. Terrestrial land. That is like
Yes,
coastal.
terrestrial land. We talk more of terrestrial land.
And how?
How does it affect youth in the agri sector since agriculture connects all, the rich, poor, old, and young?
Oh, okay. That's a very interesting and very smart question. And particularly, I think 2 years ago when we had the Blue Economy Conference with the, I think, UN agency, something like that. I think all this land is important, and they provide a balance in our ecosystem. The terrestrial, the coastal lands, they are very important. And I think, how do they contribute to our agriculture, and how they are important? I'm trying to understand the question properly. I don't think I get it.
Mm. Okay.
Let me try. I think first of all, ensuring that we are not losing the biodiversity of these lands will be a very critical role for us. And I'm seeing, for example, here in Kenya, in the coastal bit where we have Lamu, we are seeing more young and youth-led organization working with universities, for example, and government agencies to learn on how to conserve this biodiversity and not really produce more of agriculture, but also reap more from it, like tourism, ecotourism from such lands. So sometimes we may not get the certain use of land that we wish to have from a particular terrestrial land. We could get more value out of it, for example, conserving the biodiversity and also learning things like tourism around it. So that would be one thing I think that we can look to research more and see if we can get partnerships on that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that interesting feedback. And now I want to pass another question to Jaylene, following your experience with agricultural issues when it comes to land management. And the question is from, okay, Felicia again, Ebuka, saying that talking more about other land in the coastal community, how can those youth access land with relation to the coast activities, fishing, processing, storage, distribution, and marketing? So what do you think about this, Jaylene? These are very tough questions. I can take the question again for you, Jaylene. Talking
Okay,
more
please.
about other land. In the coastal community, how can those youth access land with relation to the coast activities, fishing, processing, storage, distribution, and marketing? Jaylene, you are muted if you're talking.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so there are many challenges right now. So, but coastal areas often face intense competition for land due to tourism, development, and conservation efforts. So, strategies maybe youth involvement is very important, especially young people should really active involved in the governance and decision making process, and also they can tap a cooperative or a group of individuals or families collectively owns and manages land for their mutual benefits. So I think that's my answer.
Okay, thank you for that very interesting response. And now allow me to pass this to Amanda because of your background in Indigenous land and access as well. This is from Vanchit. It says she currently is from Cambodia, and currently the access to land and rights of indigenous people in Cambodia is crashing down. Often, their land is being taken over by high-rank government officials. So from your experience, what kind of activities or advocacy method can she use to gain or claim those land or get access to those land? So Amanda, over to you. How can they regain their land back and how can they support the indigenous people? Amanda?
Oi? Então, eu acho que é muito importante o fortalecimento, né, políticas públicas voltadas para a comunidade indígena, né? Eu sou de uma comunidade quilombola, né, Conceição das Crioulas, e a nossa organização, né, comunitária e o fortalecimento coletivo. Eu acho que isso é que pode fortalecer e pode fazer com que vocês possam retomar. Eu acho que a união e o conhecimento jurídico, tudo isso é importante, né, que pode ser agregado. A nossa titulação da terra passou por um conjunto de ações organizadas, né, políticas, jurídicas e educativas, né, que envolveu a mobilização da comunidade, o fortalecimento da identidade quilombola e o uso de ferramentas legais disponível, né? Então, eu acho que quando você tem um estudo mais aprofundado e você tenta entender da sua identidade, fica mais fácil de você conseguir a titularização da sua terra, do seu território.
Wow. Okay, thank you very much for that. So it's very important for a lot of awareness on policies for that particular response. So you have to do a lot of policy advocacy. And now allow me to send this question to Becca Zella. We have someone from Ethiopia who says, in Ethiopia, land distribution historically serves as a mechanism to accommodate the older generation. However, the system was discontinued due to its negative consequences, particularly parcel fragmentation and the resulting food insecurities. As a result, the younger generation now face significant barriers to accessing land, since land transactions, especially sale, are prohibited and only use right rental agreement are permitted. Given this context, this is where the question comes in. What policy options do you think Ethiopia should consider? Becca Zella.
Can I get the context first? I got the question, but the context part, you lost me.
Okay, so they said historically they were accommodating older people using land. However, they've stopped because of the negative consequences. And as a result, the younger generation are now having a lot of issues in accessing land. So this is the background. So now the question is, what policy options do you think they should reconsider?
I think in my presentation, I spoke about having policies that give high priority, high preference to young people when it comes to the ownership of land, to ensure that we don't have old people being the ones that own land. And it goes back to having young people participating in policy reforms. We need policy reforms that integrate the voices of young people. So what's important is for us to have, and when having young people, I've seen that we keep pushing for young people to lead. Let's have effective people in leadership positions, in decision-making processes, people who will represent the voices of the marginalized group. When you get there, make sure that you represent the community, that you represent the views of your community. So we need to have policies that give high preference to young people. We need to ensure that maybe there are quota systems that give young people at least a chance to also participate in decision-making processes when it comes to leadership, to land issues, and ensure that the young people that we choose are effective. Not just choosing Bege because we love her, but choose Bege because we know she will speak with our voice. She will represent our grievances. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Bekazela. Now I'll just take two more questions and we should be rounding up this session. And allow me to bring in Tommy from the Land Portal. A question that was asked was, what advice would you give to a youth in the NGO sector who studied a land-related course but has not yet gotten opportunities to really practice in land and housing-related work? In future, they would want to start up an organization related to land rights and affordable housing. So what advice would you give to young people in the NGO sector?
Thank you very much. Obviously, I can't answer the question directly because it lacks, I lack so much information. But what I can say, and I used to tell this to my students at university as well, that one of the most important skills we learn at university is about the process of learning. In other words, it's not so much the contents. Of course, that is important, but the skill of learning. And so if I had to give any advice to someone that is sitting in that situation, and this is unfortunately not a very uncommon situation in many countries in the global south, where we have many graduates that are often still on the streets looking for opportunities. And so my advice would be to take the skills that you have learned at university, not only about the subject matter, but about the process of learning, acquire knowledge, find out what are the needs. In other words, don't start an organization because you want something to do. Start an organization because you have identified a need, because you identify a skill set that you have that can contribute to fulfilling that need. That might mean surveying some colleagues, surveying some friends, surveying your neighborhood to find out what are the needs in that community. Are there other organizations that are partially or partly serving those needs? What support do they need? And often I think you can best approach the problem by doing rigorous work on who is doing something similar or who is not doing it, but doing it in another place or in another location, in another settlement, and start building up a base from there. And I think really to be innovative, to be daring, but it's always about learning more, finding out what is needed, and seeing how you can contribute to the need that exists and put it down on paper. Describe the need. Sometimes we have this, I call it the gut feel, like you have this intuitive feel that, yes, of course, there is a need, until I ask you to describe it. Then it forces you to reflect not only on the assumptions that you hold, but on the challenges to those assumptions, and ask yourself the difficult questions. Who would pay for the service? Why would they pay for the service? How do you generate revenue for the effort that you are delivering? So unfortunately, it sounds a little bit not so specific, but it comes down to really kind of trying to prepare yourself and understanding a problem and finding a solution or a way to address that problem.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tommy, for that. And let me just hold you one more time to respond to this question of how can we address the risk that elite youth may co-opt initiatives, and what strategies can ensure that these movements are genuinely led by the poor? How do we safeguard youth empowerment so that it does not end up maintaining the existing status quo of inequality? Wow, a tough question. I don't want to be on your seat right now.
Yeah, so that question is really fundamental to, I think, some of the debates that we've been having about land reform in Africa, where we see land reform as a panacea for broader issues of structural inequality. And here, my verdict is not very optimistic. Land is not a panacea for necessarily addressing structural inequality. It can be one of the tools, but poverty, inequality, and the way power is utilized in our context often derives from a much broader framing of inequality that is entrenched across all sectors, whether that be fishing concessions, mining concessions, access to insider information to start businesses in anticipation of an oil boom, or an anticipation of contracts being awarded by the Department of Prison Services for uniforms. Then you find the connected youth are the ones that have registered companies beforehand and engage in this kind of briefcase business to supply those needs. A lot of that is based on access to information that is not open, that is not public, that is treated as a commodity to leverage power, to entrench power. So unfortunately, I think even though we try to address that in the land sector, and we can, privilege and power is really part of a greater set of factors that are driving inequality in Africa, that is driving inequality and the disenfranchisement, and I would say the disillusionment of the youth. Having said that, one of the ways to do that, and it might seem a little bit naive because it goes back to the political process, is really for the youth to organize and to demand, whether it is that land rights and land processes and the transfer of land processes be made more public, be made more transparent. And the youth have shown many times and many examples that when they take to the streets, when they protest, when they refuse to participate in elections, when they start their own political movements, they can drive change. But we must always just remember that this kind of political change does not happen or require change only in the land sector. And so sometimes we also need to mobilize more broader than only the land sector when it comes to these structural issues of inequality across society that is prevalent in all sectors of the economy.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much for that, Tommy. And a round of applause from the audience, guys, to all our panel speakers for today, Jaylene, Amanda, Bekazela. Oh my God, their stories, their words were really thought-provoking. Today, we have seen how land is not only a question of access or ownership, it's about identity, it's about opportunities, about justice, especially in the context of climate change. And to all our speakers, kudos to you all. And now to all participants, thank you so much. I think your engagement in the chat as well has reminded us that empowering youth means recognizing their ideas, protecting their rights, and amplifying their voices for both the local and the global stages. Today, we've heard from a lot of people. We've heard from young leaders already shaping land and climate solutions. And despite the systemic barriers, they have excelled. This conference builds on the global frameworks such as the Sustainable Developmental Goals, the UNFCCC, and the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, all of which recognizes that young people are not only the future, but are essential actors for today in land and climate governance. Therefore, to all my participants, all my speakers, everyone today, let us keep this momentum alive as we work towards centering young people, youth in decision leading to COP30 and even beyond. Thank you again to our speakers and to you all for your engagement. Let's carry this energy into the next session, and I look forward to sharing another story with you at the closing session on the 11th of September. Don't forget to visit the Land Portal conference page, landsportal.org, to access more information and resources from this event and even more information on land. The Land Portal Foundation was created to make land governance information inclusive and accessible. And today, it has become a trusted global knowledge broker and community. With that, I officially close this plenary session. My name is Betty Osei Bonsu Ejay. It's been a privilege to moderate this session with you. Stay tuned.
Thank you.